was talking with Pastor Steve over the last day or so, and told him I had something that was kind of cooking in my heart. And he said, I want you to share it. So I'm going to share it with you today, if that's okay. I guess if it's not, I'm going to do it anyway. But some of you that don't know me, I'm Pastor J.D. King. I'm one of the staff pastors here. I'm really privileged to serve with James Kopang, Pastor Mark Peterson, Jack Walter, Aaron Lage. Where you at, Aaron? I'll see you. There's Aaron toward the back with the backsliders there. That's where we need him. Eric Thomason, of course. Love Eric. Got so many other members of the leadership team. Did I say you, Jack? Jack, you and Jam, but I love you guys. We've got an amazing group of people here that are serving. You know, I know James and his boys helped load up and help somebody yesterday that was in need. Grateful for the kind of things that are going on. Got a great staff here. I love these guys. I'm so glad to get to work with them. Amazing people. Are you glad? Well, I like doing big revival messages, but God's been talking to me a lot about us as a body, as a family, as a group. And sometimes I think we need to be thinking about what it means to be a family. And you know what? Families sometimes go through seasons. They go through changes. They go through growth. And I think sometimes it's a little bit easier in the natural because our natural families come to a certain point and they kind of stay static. And I guess unless you're like the Kopang family and you keep having little ones, but most of us, we eventually have the number of kids we're going to have, and then our family doesn't radically change. So you start kind of being able to build an identity around your family. Well, the thing about church is it's harder because guess what? We never stop having new members of the family if we do this right. If your attitude is, well, man, I just wish we would just get strong and stay strong, then I guess you don't have a heart for a family that would grow. Because if a family really grows, there's always going to be somebody weak coming in. And I think sometimes there's difficult matters as God's trying to speak to us, as God's trying to position us, as God is trying to take World Revival Church into His future. And sometimes we're wrestling with what it means to be a family. You know, for a number of years, a lot of the people that became a part of our church were some of the best discipled people that moved from other churches and other states, and they moved here and came into the door, which is great. It's great to have really discipled, fiery people that are ready to come right in and get going. You know what we're seeing happen now? A lot of regular folks from Kansas City beginning to come into World Revival Church. Somebody told me the other day, well, our church is just not as strong as it used to be. I go, yeah. That means we're being successful at touching new lives and bringing people in. That's not easy. We're trying to figure out, what does it mean to be a family? What does it mean to do this? What does it mean to move forward? And it isn't easy. You know, we're trying to figure out our identity and our role and our function and who we are and what we're trying to do. And today I believe I kind of have a word that speaks to this. Is this okay? I guess whether it is, I hope it is, because I'm ready to bring it. I know it's okay. I'm going to go to a familiar passage, and we're going to hopefully go to a new place in a familiar passage. Turn in your Bibles to Luke 15. We're going to read about the lost sons, as some would call the prodigal son story. Luke chapter 15, verse 11. This is a story about a family. I always think about some of the dynamics of family. You know, this Wednesday night, my whole family is going to get baptized. Somebody say, JD, haven't you been baptized before? Yes, but I probably need it again. But I'm really excited. My kids have never been baptized before, and I'm so excited. Now, when I get baptized, I got to look out for Eric and James and a few others. They said I probably need a double dip or something. Hold me under a little bit till the bubbles stop bubbling or whatever, you know. But family, you know, stories of family, trying to wrestle with family, trying to figure out who you are. Brothers and sisters, positions, identity, function, future, inheritances. It's really the kind of stuff that sometimes motivates us. It's the kind of stuff that we talk about. It's the kind of things we feel deeply. Sometimes we feel it and we never talk about it. Families, identities, functions, roles. Am I okay? Am I not okay? What does my father think about me? What is my place in the family? How do I become who I've been called to be? Anybody ever feel those things? And whether you're new or whether you're old, we're all wrestling with this. Where am I at? Who can I be? What's God saying about me? Well, this is a story that Jesus told. And it's a very familiar story, so sometimes it's hard to preach familiar stories. But I believe there's some insights, some little corners, some little perceptions here that may help us as we move forward. So Jesus begins in verse 11. He said, a man had 2 sons. Sometimes when we tell the story, we get the idea only had one. But he had 2 sons. Had an older son and a younger son. Apparently this man was a wealthy man, had land, had owned things, owned cattle. It says this in verse 12, the younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now, before you die. That's a real nice line. He says, hey, Dad, I want that inheritance you're going to give me when you die, like now. You know, I know that like you're supposed to give this to me after you croak, but how about this? How about we just pretend like you're dead now and give me all I got coming to me? A real lovely attitude, right? Shockingly here, this passage says this, so the father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. And the older son would have gotten maybe a double portion, twice the amount of land. Younger son would have got a third there. And so he hands it, distributes the inheritance ahead of time, or at least begins that process. So really this is a story about a son beginning to behave himself very terribly. Like today's modern age, most kids are not nearly as honorable as they were at this time period. Kids are pretty entitled these days. Back then they were not. The idea that you say, hey, Daddy, give me what's mine now, I don't really care about you, would have been something that probably would have resulted in disinheritance. It would have resulted in him being kicked out of the family. They would have taken him out in front of the whole community and exposed him. He would have been shamed by the elders. This was not a good attitude to have. Hey, Dad, hey, Pops, what you got for me? Come on, bring it on to me. Come on, Daddy. Come on, Pops, you're sticking around here too long. Come on, I want what's mine, Daddy. What you got? Come on, that all you got, Dad? Come on, you can give me a little more than that. It's just real dishonorable, and it gets worse. Verse 13, it says, a few days later, this younger son packed up all his belongings and moved to a distant land where he wasted his money in wild living. So, come on, Daddy, give me my money. I'm going to go off to Vegas. Come on, I got some fun to have, Daddy. Come on. Give me mine. He moved away from the family, moved away from the community, moved away from his entire way of life. The idea is he moved away from covenant, away from blessing, away from a good future, and went off to a place and began to live terribly, dishonorably. He began to behave himself in ways that are unimaginable. Sometimes in family, we have those kinds of moments. Everybody's got one of those uncles, you know. They know what I'm talking about? One of those uncles that doesn't get invited to stuff. Maybe you don't, but I'm from Arkansas, and there's a lot of uncles like that. But it's like, oh, God, we got to invite him. It's Christmas. I mean, maybe we'll just tell him late and he won't come. So here this young man, he's been raised in a family. The idea would be a good Jewish family that's honorable and right. And you got a father who is conducted himself well, and God has prospered him, and he owns land that's been in the family for generations, and they have cattle. And here this father's beginning to liquidate his assets to give this son, this snot-nosed brat, wealth and things that have been taken generations to build. And he goes far away from the family, and he begins to live in unmentionable ways. Sometimes that can happen in families. Sometimes people in families don't behave like we think they should. Verse 14, it says, about the time his money ran out. Money runs out eventually. A great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him in the fields to feed the pigs. This is how we know this is no longer in Israel. No good Jewish man would own pigs. So here he is, far from home, far from the family, far from the covenant. He has squandered generations of wealth. He has dishonored his father's name in all the community. He lives far from the place that God intended for him. And now here he is, feeding the pigs, feeding these unclean animals. The young man became so hungry that even the pods that he was feeding the pigs with looked good to him. So pig slop is now looking like good dinner. My, how the son has fallen. As Jesus is telling this story, in many ways, he's talking about a dishonorable son. He's talking about a son that the Jewish ears that are hearing this would be very disturbed by hearing this story. How could this son do this? How could he be this? How could he shame his father in this way? How could he make the family name a curse throughout the community? Everybody in town is, anybody ever been from a small town? Everybody knows your business, right? They're talking, hey, you hear what his boy did? I mean, he took a whole chunk of the property there, and he went and took the money and went off to town. He's down there, and we don't know what he's doing, but we know it ain't good. People are saying, well, what's wrong with that dad? What's wrong with that family? What's wrong with who they are? All that talk going on. And verse 17. A lot of times when people are preaching this, they like to act like this is a solution. It's not a solution. It's a conniving young man getting a fresh idea of how he can make it. It says, when he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, back at home, Dad has some hired men that have food enough to spare. And here I am dying of hunger. Maybe if I go home to my daddy and I say this to him, I'm going to come up with just the right words here that makes him feel bad. I'm going to say this: Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you, which he did. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son, which is also true. And then he says this: please make me one of your men on the bankroll. Make me one of your hired fellas. You know what? I want to get a paycheck from you, Daddy, now. Would that be all right? Now, people read this story wrong all the time. They think this guy is repenting. He's not repenting. He's conniving his way back into eating a little bit better food. You know what? I'm going to go home and I'm going to get before my dad and I'm going to cry and I'm going to weep and I'm going to acknowledge I've done a few wrong things, but maybe Dad will sign me up to get a paycheck. Yeah, it won't be as good as it was, but it's better than living with the pigs. Now you got to understand, when Jesus is telling this story, the audience would have been very, again, angered by this kind of attitude. How could this young man just think he's going to go back home, just say a few things, get on Daddy's bankroll, and just sort of keep going like nothing ever happened? This is not just an ugly young man. This is an extremely ugly young man. This is the kind of young man in that ancient world they would have taken out and stoned and killed. But we cannot forget in this story, this is also a story about a son. However terrible he's been, however dishonorable he's been, however wretched his life is, no matter how many mistakes he's made, this is still his son. The whole goal of this story, just so you know, and I'm going to tell you ahead of time, Jesus told this story to make people uncomfortable. So you say, where are you going with the story today, JD? I'm going to make you uncomfortable. You say, well, why would you do that? Because that's what Jesus wants. Why? Because sometimes in our crisis, sometimes in our challenge, it's inviting us to see afresh the things he's calling us to. Sometimes our problem is we need to rethink what it means to be family, what it means to find our place. Sometimes God is trying to speak things to help us become who we need to be. Verse 20, so he returned home to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. I love this. It says, filled with love and compassion. Let's just pause on that for just a minute. You have this wretched young man who has done so many terrible things. And he's beginning to come home, not with the right intentions, but a way to just sort of cover up his problems. And while he's coming, the father looks, and something begins to rise up in the heart of the father. Something begins to stir in his soul. And guys, I got to just tell you this, that I think sometimes in religion and church, we don't begin to see the heart of the Father like we should. We don't begin to see the abundance of the Father. We don't begin to see the generosity of the Father. We start talking about all these other things that are good, but we start missing some of the heart of this here. But this Father, he's filled with love and compassion. Let me tell you, I spent a lot of years in church never really knowing that. I mean, I knew it in theory. I knew it hearing it on a page, but I didn't actually know it. It wasn't rhema word to me. It hadn't come alive to me in the way that it should. There's some of you here in this church today that you don't know that, and I want to invite you to encounter a God like this. But he's filled with love and compassion, and he ran to his son. Why did he run to his son? Because if he didn't, the community would have killed him. I don't know if you know this, but old men don't run. Unless they're playing basketball or something, but old men do not run. This man ran, but it's out of compassion. He's breaking culture. He's breaking the protocols. He's picking up, the garment that he wore and holding it up and running outside of the community in the eyes of all these people that have been saying all these things. And he runs to his son and begins to embrace him. You say, what did this son do to deserve this? Absolutely nothing. What did this son do that would make him be welcomed in the community or in the home? Nothing. He's done everything that would actually disqualify him in every way. But the father comes, he runs and embraces him. And the son, probably shocked, he turns to his father and he begins to say the lines that he'd rehearsed before. He says, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. And I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But before he could get that third line out, before he could get out his own self-justification, the father begins to interrupt him. The text here says, but his father. Right now today, you're coming in here, some of you in here like, man, I've messed up my whole life. I've ruined everything. I've made so many mistakes. I've ruined relationships. I've hindered things. I've lied. I've deceived people. I've been selfish. I've been violent. I've been just decrepit in every way. And you're trying to begin to speak. You're trying to justify. You're trying to position yourself. But the Father comes in and begins to interrupt you. I turn for a moment to some of you that are not as well known in our church. Maybe you're newer. Maybe you haven't been here a lot of years. I look to you. You say, I have a wrecked life. I have problems. I've done many terrible things. I've been gripped by sexual immorality. I've been gripped by darkness, anger, bitterness. I can't hold on to relationships at all in my life. I want to tell you this, that God's inviting you back into family. God's inviting you back to have a place at the table. You're going to stand up and try to say, yeah, but I did this or I did that, or hey, maybe if I could just do this, and God's going to interrupt you before it can get out of your mouth. But the Father said to his servants, quick, do it now. Bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. What he's saying is, hey, go in my closet and get my best suit. We're going to go and put it on this boy. Go get a ring on his finger. You know what that is? That's the family credit card. Signet ring has a little daddy's insignia on there, and you'd seal it on the wax. When it comes time to do business, that ring said it was legit. Bam, let's go get the ring. We're going to put the ring on his finger. This kid, he got to have eyeballs the size of saucers now. Why? Let's go put sandals on his feet. All the slaves were barefooted, but the masters wore shoes. Let's go get him some shoes. Got him some BBB shoes. A couple of you guys got that, but let's go and kill the fatted calf. See, you only kill the fatted calf when you're going to feed the whole town. You know, we have now decided to order out from Ruth Chris Steakhouse. Like, that's going to be extremely expensive. I know. We're going to feed the whole town the finest steak you could ever eat. He says, for the son was dead, but he's now returned to life. He was lost, and now he's found. So let the party begin. This is a story about family. And if we really understand the story right, it's actually a very uncomfortable story for some of us. Because what it is a story about inviting into, welcoming into, and enjoying people that have no business being in the family. It's about letting someone have a seat at the table that you've written off as too immoral, too impure, too dishonorable to have a place in the family. You say, I don't do that. Yeah, you do. Because you know what we do as brothers and sisters? We start trying to evaluate each other. Well, man, I tell you what, I don't know what kind of anointing he's got, but they got this kind of anointing. Well, you know what? They're this or they're that. We start getting into competition. I used to do it with my brothers, man. We were trying to figure out who would be the first one to eat all the Fruity Pebbles. Mom would buy the box, and it would be gone like in a day because we're competing with each other. Who's going to eat it? He's going to eat it all. You know, we're pouring it in, not even hungry. You're going to eat it because if you don't eat it, they're going to take it. You know, they had the chicken legs, and there'd be like one extra chicken leg, so you had to make sure you got the one extra chicken leg. I know about brothers. They used to go in my room and steal my clothes. The clothes I ironed, the nice clothes. How it made me mad. Families are families, and families are messy. And growing families have problems because we're like, whoa, Do they belong in the family? Well, you know what? They're not as well behaved as the rest of us. They haven't done what's right. Families are difficult. Families are hard. The story continues here, as most of you know. Let's read more of it here. Verse 25. Meanwhile, back at the ranch. Meanwhile, the older son was out in the fields working. The older son was out working, sacrificing, pouring out, doing, laboring for what was right. Giving his life for the family business. Somehow he's so busy working, he hadn't paid any attention to what was really going on in the family. So busy plowing and doing his duty, that somehow he hadn't heard the heart of the Father, hadn't heard what was going on. But when he came home, he heard the music and the dancing in the house. What is this? And then he has to go and ask one of the slaves, what's going on? He had to go ask one of the barefooted guys what was going on, because he was one of the sandaled-footed guys that didn't have any idea. So busy working, sacrificing, and doing the things he thought he needed to do, that he somehow lost sense of what it meant to be a family. A guy so busy thinking about his performance, so busy about thinking how he needed to work, how he needed to prove who he was. The servant looks at him and says, your brother's back. Your father's killed a fatted calf and we're celebrating because of his safe return. And he's looking and going, what is this? You mean my rotten brother? You mean my brother that doesn't work as hard as me? You mean my brother that didn't stay in the house? You mean my brother that did all these terrible things? That has these terrible episodes out here away from town. You mean him? You mean he's back in the house? You mean he's back at the table? Say what? It's hard to be family sometimes. Come on, Dad, I'm the oldest, man. I mean, shouldn't I get it? My dad used to be worried years ago. I paid for my own college and my brothers didn't. He said, well, were you mad at me about that? I said, no, I didn't expect you to owe me anything. Sometimes there can be those feelings, though. There can be those senses, because we have this idea in our head who gets to have what spot. We have in our head who gets to have favor and who doesn't. We have in our head what it looks like to supposedly do this, but somewhere along the way we forget what it really means to be family. We think this is something other than what it is. We think that church and ministry and life and salvation and ministry, opportunity, we think that's all something different than what it is. I can assure you that I am not worthy and I'm in no position to stand before you and preach today. But it doesn't change the fact that I am. We start having competitions with our brothers and our sisters. Verse 28, it says the older brother was angry. It's funny, when you're so busy trying to perform, it's easy to get angry. When you're so busy comparing your scorecard to somebody else, it's easy to get angry. And he wouldn't go in. He wouldn't go in the house. He wouldn't go in the party. He wouldn't go in the revival meeting. Somewhere along the way, he forgot that revival was not for the already revived. Somewhere along the way, he forgot
That grace wasn't just for those who thought they didn't need it. His father then gets up from the table, walks out of his own party, walks past his guests, walks past everyone in the community, and steps outside just to begin to placate his older son who thinks he knows better. His father came out and begged him, come on in, son. Come on. Let's begin to be family. Let's do this. Let's figure this out. Come on in. But he replied, all these years I've slaved for you. All these years I've worked for you. All these years I've sacrificed. All these years I put all this energy into what you're trying to do, Dad. All these years I've come to all the time, to all the things that you have. I put all this energy in. I put all this time in. Now I'm angry. And never once have I refused to do the things you've asked. I've worked, I've sacrificed, I've been here, I put in all the years. I'm angry. In all that time, you've never even given me one goat. Just one little goat for me and my friends to eat. Yet this son of yours, it's funny. This is now not his brother. It's not part of his family. It's funny because sometimes we get so busy with our head down and we're working and we're doing and we're plowing and we're going and we don't look up and see anybody else. We don't look across and see someone else. We don't begin to have compassion. We begin to forget that this family is about more than those who think they've done everything right. More than those who think they've arrived. More than those who perceive themselves as having the big inheritance. This son of yours, suddenly we forget that we're called to bring in and help the weak and guide them in their brokenness and their foolishness. Somebody once told me, well, I don't really feel like I need to get to know the new people that come into World Revival Church because, we'll just stick around. If they make it a year or two, then maybe they're worth knowing. Oh, okay, that brother, that brother of somebody else's I see. That person that is not as good at performing as you. That person hadn't done everything right just like you. Boy, that's just wonderful. Thank you. Thank you that you don't want them to be in family with you. This son of yours is back after squandering the money on prostitutes, sexually immoral, done these wrong things. And you celebrate by receiving him in. By going all out, by having fun, and by rejoicing and trying to move forward in joy and life. Dear God, how could you, Father, show compassion? How could you show love? How could you let someone participate who has no value or worth? It's amazing how we can somewhere along the way miss the point here. We can think this is about whether you've performed well or whether you've performed poorly, as if that's the primary issue. Please hear me today. Let me take a caveat for a minute. Obviously, when we perform bad, when we do wrong things, it destroys our lives. It destroys the lives of others. But that's not the only thing when it comes to family that we're looking at. I can assure you that my children have done terribly unpleasant things to me. Like the time my kid decided to miss the potty on my shoe, my son. I could tell dozens of stories like that, but this is a mixed audience, so I won't. I can remember the time Allie decided to regurgitate right in my face. She's probably 11 that I'm telling that story, but it was when she was littler. Family. You say, well, what are you talking about? This is talking about family. What do you mean? If a family member's awful, we don't forget them. If a family member is terrible, we try to welcome them, we try to receive them, and on some level, we try to give them a seat at the table. We're talking about family here. We're talking about the Father in heaven. We're talking about a desire to build, to gather, to receive. We cannot forget what this is all about. This is not entirely about how well you behave. Because if it is, we're all doomed. But you do need to behave. Your wife said so now. Verse 31, his father looked at this hard-working, sacrificial, seemingly long-suffering son who ironically didn't share the father's heart. It's funny, you can be in and have your head down and work hard and still be missing the heart of the Father. The father said to him, "Dear son, you've always stayed by me, and everything that I have is yours." This is one of the big takeaways. The Lord spoke to me about this, and he said this: what you have got to start learning to do, I've learned this from James Coping. Pastor James taught this to me, but I want to teach it to you. But see this, one of the ways that the elder brother, the elder son, the people that have been doing this for a long time can do better is this. Guess what? You can enjoy the fruit of what we've done. You can enjoy the glory. You don't always have to just gut it out. You can receive. You can enjoy. Here, let me give you a secret. Guess what? All that World Revival Church has is yours. Sometimes we've got to look up from all our perceived plowing and receive, to enjoy, to celebrate, to laugh, to realize and enjoy the love and compassion of a real, benevolent Father who isn't just putting you in a position to plow. He isn't just putting you in a position to build something. He's putting you in a position to enjoy the fruits of family, to enjoy God's presence. If you don't enjoy God's presence, if you're not experiencing it, if you never laugh, then you're missing this somehow. If you never have any compassion, any joy, any life, anything good hitting you, then you're somehow missing this. You're missing what it means to be family. We're supposed to be sons and daughters of the living God, doing this life together. And we have weak ones coming in, and we've got strong ones praying and doing, but we're finding a way to do this together. And we're stumbling into this, and we're moving into this, and we're becoming this amazing kingdom family that has all kinds of stuff going on. And we're not excusing sin, but we're inviting sinners to change. Inviting people to become what God made them to be. We're showing compassion. We don't just say, well, they left the family, so I guess that's somebody else's brother. No, that's your brother. It's your family. And if they're weak, it's partly your fault. It's your job to love them. It's your job to teach them. Some of you guys are waiting on the pastors to disciple and take care of everybody all the time. That's good. That's good. But I think it's kind of hard to a group of, say, 7 people or so to take care of, say, like 1,000 people on a level you think. You say, well, there's people that aren't getting discipled, and there's people that are weak, and there's people that got sin in their life, and they don't know. Well, okay, that's probably true. What are you doing about it? How are you loving them? How are you treating them like family? How are you inviting them into their destiny? How are you helping them see? How are you modeling for them what could be and should be? You see, friends, again, this is what I felt like the Lord spoke to me about. It's kind of quiet, which means I'm either nailing it or I'm really blowing it. Star says I'm preaching, so I'll take it. Families are messy. Families are hard. Your mom and dad always liked one of your siblings better than you, but they lied and said they didn't. It's messy. Somebody gets favor when they shouldn't. Somebody gets to do something you think they shouldn't do. Sometimes people just got the goods and you don't, and it hurts. As much as I would love to lead worship, I'm just not going to do it ever. It's not going to happen. It's a blessing to all of you that I don't do that. Family. World Revival Church is many things. It's a church on mission. It's a church being called to change the world. It's a church, being called to deliver messages and decree things and to embody things, and all that's true. But underneath all of that, World Revival Church is a family. And if we don't get this part right, a lot of the other stuff is not going to quite work as well as it should. You say, well, JD, I care about the other stuff. Good, I'm glad you do. But I would ask you to help me, help these pastors, help us as we're trying to build a family. There's no such thing as a perfect family. And there's no such thing as a perfect church family. There is messiness. There is confusion. Sometimes there is disappointment. That's life. The question is now, what are we going to do with it? Yes, there's people in our family that have no business being in our family. But what are we going to do with them now that they're here with us? What are we going to do when God has called us to find a way to step into this and become people that know and love this benevolent Father, this kind Father? The Scripture says here that He's filled with love and compassion. You say, well, I don't know that I believe that about God. Well, then you don't understand family then. Some of you say, well, JD, your message sounds humanistic. No, my message is the gospel, friend. It's God's grace coming down to people, and it's a message of transformation. It's a message of life. If we can get this right, I believe we could change the world. I believe this. I believe this very strongly. I look out in the church here today, and there are a lot of people here that probably feel like the younger brother who did a lot of wrong things. He did. The good news I want to tell you is there is a place for you here in this family. That we love you, we want you, and we want you to change. We know you're going to change by the grace and goodness and mercy of the Father. Here in just a little bit, we're going to open up the altar, and if that is you, if you feel like, man, I've got to get some stuff worked out, come on down. We got some people ready to pray for you. It's going to be amazing. But I look to some of my friends and fellow laborers, and to you as well, and sometimes we're older brothers, and maybe we've got a better scorecard, but the question is, do we still have that same heart of the family? Do we ignore the people that sit in the back? Do we see somebody who doesn't worship as hard as us and say, well, I'm not going to waste my time with them? Do we start getting our scorecards out and try to compare how good we think we are, or how we perceive our statuses in this church, or who should be doing this or who should be doing that? Listen, let's get over these selfish squabbles. Let's get over trying to argue over who's going to get the last bowl of Fruity Pebbles. Listen, guys, we need to learn to value our brothers and our sisters. We need to sometimes look beyond their faults and call out their destinies. Call out who God is making them to be, helping them get into those places they need to be. Guys, is there problems with sin? Of course there is. Do we need to work through that? Of course we do. Do we need to call out sin when it needs to be called out? Of course we need to do that. A good father always does that. But He's bringing us toward gathering, toward purpose, toward functioning. The biggest sin in the end is not whether or not you perform well. The biggest sin in the end is whether you're willing to really be in and function in the family. The younger brother's biggest sin was not his sins, but it was leaving home and going far from the embrace of the Father. So I'll say to you this. If being family is one of the ways that we really figure out how to do this, that might mean we need to try to get together as much as we can. That means we need to make our lives open to other people. It means we need to get lots of compassion and patience with people. It means that we've got to get a fresh vision of what God's up to. What if I told you that God is bringing glory and goodness and strength, and He's just trying to find some people that will actually let Him do it? What if I told you there could be a church that could absolutely wreck Kansas City with the goodness and glory of God, and we're in the running to be that church? And the answer of whether we get this or not depends on whether we learn how to do family. With all the divorce and all the brokenness, I get it, we have a hard time doing family. But what if it changed? What if we discovered something we never knew? What if we just go ahead and enter into the party right next to the degenerates, right next to the broken, right next to the people that have been married 4 or 5 times? And we just dance together. We just sing together. And we throw away our scorecards and just learn to love and be filled with strength and joy and love the fact that other people are treated better than they deserve. What if we did that? Listen, today, if you're angry about the direction our church is going, I had asked you to check your heart. You say, well, I don't know what I think about all that. Well, okay. I guess you don't have to know. What if I told you this is the gospel, and what you're actually fighting is the goodness of the gospel? What if I told you that it's about family and not your legalistic notions of performance? You're locked into some kind of pre-Abrahamic religion that misses so much of what Jesus actually did. What if I told you that? Listen here, guys, none of us perform that good, really, anyway. I'll just ask your husband or wife, and they'll tell the truth. This is a story, guys. Story of 2 sons, stories of families. Lots of problems with the younger son, lots of problems with the older son. But I can tell you this, there's an amazing father right at the heart of it, and he's moving in and saying, in spite of you, in spite of where you've been, in spite of what you've done, in spite of what you know, I'm here, I'm gathering you. Come on in. Come and receive. Come and know. Come and experience. Come and become. Come and be washed. Come and be renewed. Let me put the robe on you. Let me give you the ring. Let me give you a place. Some of you have had that all along and you just didn't know it. Guess what? Let's just kill a fatted calf today. It's ours to kill. Won't you stand up with me? I'm going to go ahead and say this. If we don't get this right, we're going to miss our destiny. If we don't get this right, we're not going to be able to reach Kansas City. Some of you say, well, I don't really have a heart to reach Kansas City. Okay, that's fine. But just don't get in the way of those who do. God is going to touch us. God's going to help us. He's an amazing God. He's benevolent. He's kind. He's here to embrace us. He's here to take us to a place. We're going to have a prayer team come down here, but some of you say, man, JD, I heard you today, and I feel like I've messed up everything. I've ruined everything. Okay? There's good news for you. There's going to be people here. They'll pray for you. You can get things moving in the right direction. I promise you we're going to try to love you the best we can and hold you in our family. Just keep coming and keep trying, okay? Some of my own friends and people I serve with, we got to get this heart too. Heart for family. Heart for people. Heart for people that are actually wretched. Heart for people that actually don't know the right things to do. Hearts for people who don't worship well, who are not dedicated and not committed. Hearts for people that desperately need new encounters with Jesus. We have got to get hearts for those people. Remember, we are a family. And if we talk about the power of all, let me give you a little hint here. That all includes all. Not just the first 6 rows. God's doing it. God's doing it. God's helping it. God's going to make this happen. We have good ahead. I know it. I can feel it. I committed my whole life to this, guys. You know, I like doing, some of you don't know, I was involved with what now Bill and Carol Gilpin are doing. I was involved with the network in reaching out to churches. I love doing that. Kind of, part of me doesn't like moving away from that. But God said, I need you to do this. And look, I'm pouring my life into this now. And I want us to do, and I know the guys working with me, James and Eric and Mark and Jack, all of us, we all have a heart for this. We're not just playing around. We want to bring this into a place of goodness and glory and truth. We want our children being touched by the presence and power of God. We want new people that have no idea how to do this to come in and find a place and grow and be discipled. It may take longer than some of us are used to, but it can happen and it will happen. I'm telling you, there is good things ahead for World Revival Church, but we've got to not let family squabbles get in the way of this. Throw away your scorecard and just learn how to be family. Stop your competition. Just learn how to receive, learn how to love. Prayer team, why don't you come on down? I know God is stirring a lot of us here. Let's keep our hearts open. Let's keep our minds open. It's hard to do family. Let's figure out how to do this. You say, well, this is really messy. Yeah, it is. It looks like things I'm not comfortable with. I get it. If you really struggle with what I'm saying here, you probably ought to be the first one in line to come get prayer. God is calling us to family. It's family. We're undergirded by family and community. If we don't get this, we're going to miss everything else. It's time. It's time to rise up. It's time to get this. It's time to envision this. The benevolent Father is not just inviting the younger son. He's inviting the older son. Come on into the party. Come on in. Come on in. Let's just all dance together. Let's just all do this together. Let's all become this together. It's ready. It's time. The party's been set. The music is going. The wonder is beginning. Power is coming. Lives are being changed. Would you come? Would you come to the party? Come!